In this video, the Historic Ordnance series, we're going to look at the Soviet TM-41 metallic anti-tank mine. Now, this mine entered service in 1941 during World War II, right near the beginning, not long after the Soviet Union was invaded by Germany. This mine was designed to basically replace the mines that were already in inventory because the Russians were finding that the existing stocks they had of anti-tank mines were insufficient, not strong enough to handle the German panzers as they were rolling across Russia. So they came up with this. This mine was upgraded and improved in 1944, and that version is the TM-44. The information for both translates over. The 44 just has a few small minor changes on it, probably recommendations from the troops in the field. The main way that I can see looking at pictures to tell the difference between a 41 and a 44 is what they call the pressure cap on top. What you see here is the 1941 version, which you have a cap with a metal strip welded to the top that you could grab and twist to either tighten or loosen. It looks like the 44, they went to more of a cap on it that you could grasp with your fingers around the outside edges of it to turn it. And then it also had kind of a cross pattern in it that you could use probably some type of wrench to turn it also in case it was jammed in. And there are notes that the 44 weighed a little bit more than the 41, so it had just a little bit more explosive filler, but everything, even the Russians say in their historical stuff on this mine, the two mines essentially are the exact same. And this mine remained in Soviet service until it was declared obsolete and replaced by the TM-57 in the late 1950s. At that point, the Soviets pushed out existing stocks and put them in emergency wartime use for a while, and then eventually they just fed them around the world into the wars of liberation in the 1960s, 1970s, 1980s. Now, officially, from what I can find, Ukraine is the only country that still has stockpiles of these mines. Russia got rid of theirs years ago. I do not have a list of all the countries that these mines were sent to by the Soviets. I've done searches, and Google or whoever is running the search engines will not give me a list of all the countries these were sent to. But I do know that North Korea did receive a bunch of them, and then they copied it and made their own version, which is an exact copy of the TM-41, TM-44. Vietnam reportedly did get a bunch of these, did employ them in the 1960s. More than likely, their existing stockpiles have been gotten rid of because this is exceptionally obsolete. The Chinese got a hold of blueprints of these given to them in the early 1950s reportedly, and they produced their own copy, the Type 41. I will do a separate video on that mine because it uses a completely different fuse than the TM-41, so it's its own separate video. Now, some of the technicals on this. Diameter is 10.5 inches. Height is 5 3/4 inches. Weight is 12 pounds, of which 9 pounds is the explosive filler. The primary filler used was amytal, but during World War II, they used what was available, and reportedly some of these mines were filled with flake TNT. There is a separate booster which has to be added to the mine. The booster is 2 2/3 ounces, and it is a glass container of puric acid. I do not have a note as to if that booster was upgraded after the war. Now, I came across this manual in NATO manuals on ordnance that was brought into service from the Warsaw Pact. So Eastern European countries reported up, this is what we have on hand. And believe it or not, the TM-41 is still listed in NATO arsenals as recently as 2016. Why someone is still hanging on to these mines this long, I have no clue. And my only hope would be whoever still had these in those storage depots passed them off to Ukraine. Now, the fuse for this is the MV5, but reportedly you can also use the MV5K because the only difference between those two fuses is the material. When that fuse is used with this mine, it requires either the MD2 detonator, which is what was used in the 1940s, 1950s. NATO is reporting that the TM-41s that are in arsenals, the MV5s that are meant for these mines, are supposed to be equipped with the updated MD6 detonator. There is a secondary fuse well on this mine, which is on the bottom, the filler plug down here. Apparently there is a fuse well with a small booster around it right above that cap for if needed. This mine is all steel construction. Even the Soviets had in the history stuff that I was going across, stuff that was written up on these during the Soviet Union days. What this was an improvised mine, basically a steel can or a tin can filled with explosive, fit with a fuse, and then sent out to the field for troops to use. These mines come in OD green or gray in color. It just depended on the factory it came out of and what color of paint they had on hand. Markings on them are all over the place. Each factory did their own versions of the markings, but reportedly the markings at a minimum had on there the date that the mine was filled was entered on there, and the factory code where it was produced. These mines come 2 mines to a crate, and the fuses and detonators are shipped separately. Now, installation on this is exceptionally simple. First thing you're going to do, you're going to inspect the mine, you're going to inspect the fuse, you're going to inspect the detonator, and you're going to inspect the booster. Everything passes, everything's usable. You then take the components to the area where the mine is going to be emplaced. These are meant to be buried, and when you bury them, top of the ground comes to the top of the mine. Once you got the hole prepped, you're going to put the mine in the hole. You're then going to prep the MV5 fuse. In order to prep it, you take the fuse and you screw on the MD6 detonator onto the bottom. At that point, you're going to unscrew the pressure cap from the center of the top of the pressure plate of the mine. You're going to insert the glass bottle in there of the puric acid booster. You are then going to lower in the fuse, putting the blasting cap into the channel that's in that glass bottle. You are then going to replace the pressure cap on the top of the mine. The mine is now armed. It is now ready. There is no safety features on the MV5 detonator or the MV5 fuse which is why the Soviets ended up replacing those in the early 1950s. So the mine is ready to go through camouflage. Now, to remove this mine from the minefield, first off, need to be aware these mines were produced with metal that was emergency wartime availability, so they rust and corrode really quickly. And there's a lot of notes. Even NATO says if these mines are used, it is not recommended to attempt recovery because of the ages of the fuses and the shoddy materials used in their construction. NATO recommends destroying the mines in place. But the actual removal procedures, according to the U.S. Army, from a manual from the 1950s that I came across that did talk about these. First off, you're going to check around the area where the mine is supposed to be located, see if there's any secondary protective anti-personnel mines or booby traps. If none are located, locate the mine, easy to do, metallic casing. Once you locate the mine, you're going to uncover it and you're going to check the sides and underneath for an anti-handling device. If an anti-handling device is found, stop what you're doing, destroy the mine in place. If no anti-handling devices are located, remove the pressure cap from the top of the pressure plate. Very carefully with 2 fingers grasp the top of the MV5 fuse and attempt to remove it from the mine. There is a note that if the fuse cannot be removed from the mine easily, stop what you're doing, destroy the mine in place. But after you would remove the fuse, you're going to replace the protective cap on the mine, remove the mine from the ground, remove the protective cap again, turn the mine to the side, and then very carefully keep tilting that mine with your hand right in front of the fuse well until that booster falls out down into your hand. Grasp it, remove it from the mine, put the mine down, set the booster down, replace the protective cap. You will then grab the fuse and remove the MD6 detonator from the fuse. Turn in all the pieces to the mine dump for later reuse or disposal. Pretty straightforward. Now down here, I'll point out on the diagram, you can see that this is an improvised mine that was in production. It's just a giant tin can. They had a piece of sheet metal that was kind of spot welded inside here with a separation between the pressure plate and that piece of sheet metal. Underneath that sheet metal, that is where the explosive content was put in through the filler plug from the bottom. Now, how this worked, reportedly, you got a crimp on the side of the mine in this space here, this empty space, and you got crimps or ribs on the top. The ribs on the top strengthened the pressure plate on this mine so that it would function the way they wanted it to, that it would crush as essentially a plate going all the way across, not just bend on one side and potentially not set the fuse off. The crimp right in here, going all the way around, that also aided in the crushing effect of the pressure plate, actually caused it to come down as a unit, not just tilt. That allowed enough pressure onto the MV5 fuse to set off the detonator, to set off the booster charge, which then burst the thin sheet metal tube that it was in here and set off the main explosive content. By 1943, the Soviet Army said that these mines were out of date. they were insufficient for tanks at that point. So by the time that Tiger tanks are coming out, Panther tanks are coming out, these things were already declared obsolete, but they kept them in service because they could still be used behind enemy lines for use against supply trucks. So they kept them around, and they were still in the inventory as a frontline mine until the late 1950s, at which point they went to emergency wartime reserve. Reportedly, that is the source of what the Ukrainians have. The mines that they have, the TM-41s, those are the old Soviet stockpiles of TM-41s and TM-44s that were left in their depots. So there you go. It's an exceptionally old mine. It's extremely dangerous because the explosive filler will have degraded, because I highly doubt any country that had these in the arsenals was thinking about taking this obsolete mine and replacing the explosive filler with something new. And I am shocked that these things were still listed as being in arsenals in Eastern Europe for NATO use as recently as 2016. That's scary. Now, for all my engineer brothers and the Patriot and militia movements, always remember, essayons.